First of all, thank you for waiting right to the end of what's been a wonderful but a long day. Thank you so much for waiting to see what I've got to say. And I'd also like to say, hasn't this been a really great conference? It's been really good, hasn't it? Right through from the first keynote this morning with Tomek through to Rick just now, and I've seen some great presentations during the day as well. So I'd like you all to give a round of applause to the organising committee. Can you do that now? Because I think they've been amazing. Haven't they been amazing? Absolutely fabulous. So it's a real pleasure and a privilege to be here. And I think my talk follows on in a little way from what you've seen earlier from one or two people. I'm going to be talking about devices and desires. How do humans experience software? What is it like for people to experience the output of our work? And who are those people for whom we're working? Because when you look at what's happening in the world, as Rick was alluding to, and as you all know, software's ubiquitous now. And this is a little cut from a newspaper in the UK last year, The Eye, on the amount of connections. So in just 1 minute, in every minute, there's 3 million search requests on Google, 87,000 hours of Netflix watched, 1.5 million songs streamed on Spotify, 156 million emails sent, 2 million minutes of calls on Skype. We're all constantly connected. And I just want to comment there on 18,000 matches on Tinder. Now, I am the old lady in the room, but I have to say, you young folk, you have made your dating process so complicated and so hard to transition. I'm so glad I'm an old lady and I just don't have to do those things anymore. It was so easy when I was young, you know. There was the other person in the village who was about the same age as you, and that was your choice. But at least you knew who they were. At least you knew they looked like what they looked like. At least you knew what their bad habits were as well as their good habits. So it had its disadvantages, I'll give you that. But my goodness me, I am so glad not to be young nowadays. And also on their weird items that dogs have in their coats, just because. Okay. Now, so we're all connected, and there's been a number of people talking about Internet of Things, and somebody I was talking to earlier was showing me how, through her smartphone, she can look at what her cats are doing at home and feed them treats automatically and watch them play and play with them. She's very sweet and very lovely. And some of that is really good, but some of it is sort of pushing beyond the bounds where many people want to be. And if you look at these URLs, they're giving you a clue. Samsung's over-the-top Family Hub smart fridge is now on sale. Over the top. How intelligent do you want your fridge to be? Okay? Just have a think about this. There's a British comedian did a sketch fairly recently, and he was talking about this type of thing. He was talking about the new technologies where they're putting intelligence into materials for clothes. And he said, I don't want to live in a world where my trousers are more intelligent than I am. So you see, that people aren't necessarily always comfortable with the things that we as technologists are comfortable with. And another one there, the survey finds constantly checking electronic devices is linked to significant stress. Now, there's really an important and interesting point to make here. The more that we're checking our electronic devices, the more we're becoming addicted to that. And the reason for it is that addiction occurs in a number of different ways, but one of the ways that you can train somebody into addictive behavior is for there to be a level of uncertainty about the response they're going to get. So there was a very famous experiment with some pigeons where they were feeding the pigeons at different intervals. And sometimes, if the pigeon tapped on a key, it got a food reward, and sometimes it didn't. And what they discovered, there are 3 populations of pigeons. One were fed consistently always. The second lot were fed intermittently. There were random intervals between whether when you touched the button or the pigeon touched the button, it got the reward or it didn't get the reward. Sometimes it happened, sometimes it didn't. It was unpredictable. And the third, it happened predictably, and then they stopped it. And what happened was the pigeons who were always being fed learnt that they always got that reward. But when the reward was stopped, they unlearned that behaviour really quickly. And the pigeons who were fed for a shorter interval stopped. They also unlearned it really quickly. The pigeons that got the reward intermittently, will I have a like on Twitter? Will I have an email today? It might happen, it might not, you don't know, it's unpredictable. Those pigeons, they never gave up. They never gave up going to press that button for the reward, just in case this time they were going to get the reward. Now that's what is happening with a lot of software now that's out on devices that people are using. Actually, we talk about UX very often, I do myself, as being a good thing, understanding the user experience and making it better. But there is a part of UX, a group within UX, which is about understanding addictive behavior and causing it in our users. And by the way, which other industries refer to their customers as users? Drug pushers and pimps. That's who we're sitting with every time we say the users. We need to get rid of that word from our vocabulary. We need to start talking about people and customers. The users, the people that we're addicting to the devices and the software we're providing them with. So, how about placing a QR code somewhere in a movie? An audience could pause the movie while watching it on their TV or computer, scan it with their smartphone and be taken to a mobile site which might tell them something they might not know about the story world and or narrative. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Some of you might think it's a good thing. Some of you, like me, might be just reminded of those really awful dates you've had where you go to the cinema with somebody and they just won't stop telling you things about the film that you don't want to know, either because you already know them or because actually part of the trajectory of the storytelling is that some things are a mystery at the moment. To me, this feels like a really horrible idea. It feels like something that actually is going to destroy the experience of the storytelling that the filmmaker has put into that film. But for some people, they're going to think, oh, that's a good idea, because I can, instead of concentrating on the film and being immersed in that experience, I can distract myself and multitask and do multiple things at once. And therefore, if we're honest, not actually experience any of them. We can put ourselves into a world of non-being and non-thinking by overstimulating. It's easy to keep track of the devices you use to watch Now TV. To see what devices you've added, select My Account and then Manage Devices. You might need to enter your username and password. You might not, of course. It's not predictable at this point where we're writing this information on this website or whatever it is. You might not. And also, to see what devices you've been using, log into My Account. Does that make any sense? No, we're confusing whose account this is and who's watching this is. Furthermore, unless you already know it, something being blue and underlined Doesn't mean anything in particular. Why is that blue and underlined? We all know that that means you can probably click on it and it be a link. But guess what? There's some websites where it doesn't that. They've just highlighted it and put an underline. So it's not clear what's going on. It's not clear. It's not the use of language has been warped. So it's no longer ordinary language that ordinary people are using. It's language that we have warped to our use and are forcing on other people. Is this my device or your device? It's ambiguous. This is a little story about a friend of mine. Very good friend, dear friend. He is not in the IT industry, but he's very much like tech, very much likes tech. Particularly likes Apple devices, very keen on them. I remember when he got his new iPad and he said to me, I went to the Apple store and it was wonderful. Everything was beautiful and it was beautifully wrapped, and I got it home and the box was so gorgeous and I undid it and it was tissue paper and you unwrap it, and I lifted it out of the box and he said, it was so slim and so curvy. I just wanted to marry it. So calm down, calm down. It's just a device. But actually that's it. Oh, the love, the passion. Oh, my goodness, my goodness. Anyway, it slightly reminds me of something that actually, because Rick was talking about human-like robots, and I have to share this with you. There was a survey done recently in the UK, and they were asking men about their attitude to sex robots. And the results of this survey was that 40% of the men surveyed said they would rather have sex with a robot than with a real woman. So on behalf of the women in this room, and possibly the women of the world, could I just say, could that 40% of men just identify themselves with some sort of badge so we know we can avoid them? So we have better things to do with our time, frankly. Anyway, yes, so devices, we just, oh God, the passion, wanting to marry them. Anyway, I was staying at my friend's house while he was away doing some work elsewhere. So I arrived at his house and got sort of settled in, and he was showing me he'd bought a new doorbell, a smart Wi-Fi, internet-enabled, everything singing and dancing, new doorbell, which included a video camera and alerting if somebody came towards the front door, so that he could be alerted in advance of the doorbell ringing and therefore be ready to go and answer the door. Because it's just otherwise life's too difficult, isn't it? Less presumably you've got servants. Anyway, so he showed me this, and isn't it exciting? And then off he went somewhere hundreds of miles away to go and get ready to do his work the next day. He's staying in a hotel somewhere. I'm staying in his house. And I mentioned that I'm quite an elderly lady. And because I'm an elderly lady, one of the things that's very characteristic of us, as well as forgetting to take our tablets, is that, that was sarcasm, is that we have to get up in the night to go to the loo and have a cup of tea. Both these things are necessary. Liquid out, liquid in is essential. So I got up in the night and went downstairs, and I was walking in the dark across the living room towards the kitchen, and suddenly I heard this most terrible groaning noise. Oh, what is that? I was terrified. It was my friend, several hundred miles away at 2 a.m. in a hotel, having just got to sleep, ready to do his work the next morning. And his iPhone had woken him up to tell him that somebody was approaching the front door because of where the doorbell had got left in his living room after we'd looked at it. So we had a short but frank exchange of views about his need to sleep and my need to have a cup of tea in the middle of the night, and parted our ways. The doorbell now firmly on its face on the table, so it couldn't actually disturb us anymore. And I used to think to him, how intelligent do you need a doorbell to be? And at what point is it actually being really stupid? Yeah, you know, why? Whoa, that's so complicated. You don't need electricity at all for a doorbell. You just need a bell. Ding, ding. It's easy. Now, why have I told you all those stories? Because you're all technical. You're all sitting there thinking, but actually everybody can use these devices. Only a few stupid, unintelligent, uneducated, old people can't use these things. So here's a survey that was done last year, and you can read up about it on NN Group. Look at the demographic. This is the richest countries in the world. This is people in work. This is people between 18 and 65. Around about a quarter unable to use a computer. Another chunk, the orange and brown, can do simple tasks. The type of simple tasks were, if an email server program is open, something like Outlook, and I tell you, I want you to find me any email by Marta, find it, that was the level of task, okay? So that's a group of people there, that's the most they can cope with. Anything more complex on the computer is too difficult. The more complex tasks were, find me an email about TestFest from Marta to Tomek. Who's sitting in the bright green sector? Oh, look, it's people like us. It's people like us. So, who are you delivering software to? Who are your customers? Who are your customers? Who are we writing this software for? Who are we testing the software for? If we're doing it for the people in that little green sector, us and our friends, we're doing just fine, providing these devices and this software and all these ways of doing things online. But if we think our customers are in the other sectors, we have to think much more carefully. Who are we building this software for? Are you building anything that is, for example, a government website? How are these people going to access it? Are you building things where you want people who have money to purchase things from you? How are you enabling them to do that? Are you providing healthcare? How are you doing that? Thinking about some of the examples Rick was giving. The skill level is not out there. The expertise and the abilities. And this is not just a thing to do with age. Although I have to say, I was in a shop recently and I got to the bit in the transaction where the salesperson, who was about 16, said to me, he's filling in a form on the computer. I just said, could I have your email address? And I couldn't see any reason why he would need my email address except for marketing me things. So I just went, email address? And he looked at me and he said, oh, it's all right. My grandma doesn't use email either. At which point I had a choice. One thing I could have done was started explaining to him about what programming was like in the 1970s and just how technical I am. And the other was just to go, oh, thank you very much. And not get marketed to. Oh my goodness, the assumptions that people make. So, and we make assumptions ourselves about the level of technical ability that people have and who's got that technical ability. Do we all have access? Are we all connected? So, for example, this is from the UK, but it's going to be the same in your country. Okay? There are people who do not have internet access because the infrastructure isn't there. The mobile connection isn't there. So people can end up with no acceptable digital access at all. I gave this talk in Sweden, and somebody just said, well, everybody's connected here. And then there was a pause, and somebody else said, not homeless people. And they're part of society too. They're fellow human beings. Do we all bank online? Again, this is UK. There are people who don't have bank accounts at all. Some of those people are running businesses, a lot of them are in jobs. People live outside what we see as being normal. People are not necessarily connected, not necessarily banking online. Recent tweets, Brexit, I have to mention Brexit. I don't know what I'm going to do. My head's going to explode. I can't bear the thought of it. I am a Remainer. I do not want to be Brexited. Brexit is like a Kafka novel, an MEP said recently. So, to apply for settled status in the UK post-Brexit, people are going to need to use an Android app or go to one of 13 centres. Guess what? You can't use an iPhone to do it, and you can only use certain sorts of Android. And the centres, there's only 13 of them. One of them's in Edinburgh. So if you live in Shetland, you could fly to Edinburgh, or you could get a ferry to Thurso and then drive 5 hours. If you live in Penzance, you could drive to Bath at 3.5, 4 hours. You know, this is like people not thinking. They've thought they've solved the problem because they've done it on Android, but they haven't thought about the range of what people do. So all those people with iPhones, suddenly, oh no, they're not top of the pack anymore. They haven't got access. Accessibility is about access. It's not necessarily about disability. And just to remind us, the way that people see themselves, this is last year, there was a Football World Cup. Some of you will have noticed. There was a Football World Cup. At the same time, there was an alternative Football World Cup, which was countries that aren't recognised. They had their own separate Football World Cup, little tiny competition in London. And I just put that on because it amused me that I don't even know what some of those places are. And one of them is sort of slap bang in the middle of where I live. I don't know who those people are. So that was in the eye again. People who've never used the internet. Look at those proportions. It's not a huge proportion, but still, there's people who've never used the internet. Even in London. And how long does it take to buy an iPhone? If you're in Lagos, 133 days work to pay for the iPhone. Presumably if you haven't paid for anything else. If you live in Zurich, 4.7 days. There's a marked difference across the world in what people can afford in order to access the devices that we take for granted. The point here is that access is not about disability. Accessibility is not about disability. It's partly about that, and that's one focus. The point here is some people are temporarily able and temporarily have access in some situations. I have a little surprise for you all. You're going to be old too. And when that happens, those of you with perfect eyesight, it won't be perfect anymore. Those of you who are able to use pointing devices and your fingers and use your fingers will shake too much. Already for me, and I'm only 63, and I'm expecting to go for another 50 years, okay? Already it's harder to use touchscreen that's at small scale. It will come to you. So right now, I think there was some in Tomic's talk this morning when there were some comments about, and I've seen a few about like dinosaurs and cavemen and seniors who will get into routines. You'll be there one day. And then you'll be looking at the people who are 20 years younger than you and going, do you know, we discussed this at a conference I went to 20 years ago, and actually, you know what? You know, the old ways we used to do things, they worked. They worked. We sorted these problems out because that's what happens, and it's true. So you constantly need to rejuvenate yourself, but you also need to realise the habits that you're in now, the ways you're working, the ways you think about other people, the ways that you think about your customers and your fellow human beings that you're serving. Do it now because you want that in 20, 30 years' time, somebody's also thinking about you in the same way. And the bits of technology, we won't even be able to imagine them at the moment. But just imagine if like me, 20, 30, 40 years ago, at my, technical new stuff, I remember the first PCs coming. I remember the first mouse. I remember before the internet, using computers then, okay? And then actually as the new stuff comes in, you have to constantly relearn and constantly relearn and constantly relearn. And there will come a point for you as well where you'll be finding that you're doing that constant relearning. And you will want then, for the people who are your age now, then, to actually be thinking, are we making what we're doing accessible to everybody? How are we helping everybody have access to this brilliant stuff that we've got? Do we actually trust the experiences? Why are we letting people into our home? This is Seth Godin talking about that social media is like people coming in and trashing your house. It's like people coming in and cutting up your curtains and throwing rubbish on the floor. The things that are happening out on Twitter and Instagram are vile. It's like being in the most horrible school playground. It's a cruel place to be. Why are we allowing things to happen which increase that cruelty? Now, there are good things that happen through social media too, like everything. But that cruelty, that horribleness that we allow into ourselves, so much of it is damaging people rather than actually making their lives better. What are we doing to make that better? So think again about what Rick was saying about the ethics of what we're doing. So how do people experience software? And I have some examples around this, and I won't cover all of them, but I want to pick off one or two to give you some examples. I had some troubles, medical troubles. I had to go to the hospital. I had to have some tests done. I had to have scans on my brain and head. It was a very worrying time. And the consultant doctor I was seeing was very senior in his field, an absolute expert in his field, one of the most highly qualified, highly intelligent people I have ever met in my life. And I went for the appointment where I was going to get my test results. You can imagine how I was feeling, because there were a number of possible outcomes from these tests that were not good. And he said, "Oh yes, your test results." And then he went, "Oh, they're on the computer," which actually did look very like this. This was only a couple of years ago. It's a terrible old piece of equipment. They left the old boy thinking, oh, he's not going to be doing anything important. He's only a hospital consultant. And he managed eventually to get this piece of software, get logged in, get the piece of software open. It was the worst interface I have ever seen in my life. It was just this mass of drop-down lists. And he was struggling around with it. And he said to me, "This is the clunkiest piece of technology I have ever had to work with. I cannot find your test results." And then he went, "They were fine." That's all I needed to know. But actually the level of stress that dealing with the computer system had put us both through was really bad. And interestingly, a couple of years before that, I'd been called in to do some work with a supplier who were providing a system for consultant doctors to look up test results. And I'd been asked to go and talk to them about quality attributes. And they would not listen. They would just about listen on security and performance. But when I started talking about usability, the response was, we don't need to consider usability because our users are hospital consultants and they're intelligent. So no, you've just misunderstood. Usability is about making everybody's life easier. It's about allowing people to not have to worry about the technology, to not have to take it into account. So that's one group of people. This group of people, the hill farmers, that's an interesting case study, asking for farming subsidies, which come in from government and from EU then. It's fine if you're a farmer on a big farm and you've got an office manager who does all your paperwork and you've got a broadband connection. But some of these guys out on the hill farms either hadn't got internet connections or still on dial-up modem, or had to go into a local village to borrow from somebody else. And one of the comments from somebody was, I normally leave filling the forms in till the last minute because it takes a couple of hours. But I've been doing the online version for 3 days now, and I'm only halfway through. It's the same form online. What were people thinking of? And now, here's the outcome of this, because you'll perhaps be thinking, it's only a form, it's only a piece of administration, it's just bureaucracy. Farmers have killed themselves because they haven't been able to get their subsidy payments, because those guys working out in those rural areas are in desperate straits. They are put in the position of not having the cash to be able to continue looking after their sheep and cattle. This was actually a safety critical system when you looked at the human experience of what it was like. And there are others there, ships captains unable to sail because reports aren't there in time. If you're blind and using a PC and it crashes, it just stops talking to you. It's all sorts of things I've encountered where actually what we've done is made people's lives so much worse with our software. The manual workers there paid in cash. The people in the IT team in that organisation were paid monthly into their bank accounts. It didn't occur to them that changing the payroll system so that instead of the pay for the weekly paid manual workers who are paid in cash, instead of that being run on a Wednesday night so it could be bagged up on Thursday and couriered to them on Friday, so that Friday lunchtime they had their money for the weekend. Their response to the idea that they were wanted to move that run to Thursday, the guys wouldn't have got their money till Monday, was that was all right. But actually there we're talking about kids not having foods at the weekend. We're talking about food on the table. We're talking about people not being able to clothe and feed their families. We're talking about potential strike action. Because people didn't have the imagination to see that if your money's not coming into a bank account, it matters what day it gets to you. It matters that you don't have the cash on time. So what I want to say to you is that people don't experience software. Humans do not experience software. Software is unimportant. Software is a service that's supposed to make people's life better and so often doesn't. And we as testers, we are a service industry into that service industry. And our job is partly to help the developers shine and be as good as possible, but it is partly a duty to people who are feeling emotions, who need to be communicated with, who are in relationships, who are feeling sensations, who are motivated to do different things. People do not experience software. Just like when Rick asked how many of us were experiencing AI, many of us were oblivious to it. People don't see it in the same way that we do. So what people want is to experience solutions to problems, things that work and they can afford and are legal and useful and usable and flexible and supportive and engaging and trustworthy and exciting and ethical. And on top of the words that Rick gave you around quality attributes, I want you to also think about these words, which are the words that we use in user experience, words about emotions, words about feelings. How do people feel when they're using this software? How do they feel when they're experiencing it? Along with that, I want to quote Vijay Karan, who I saw talking at a conference last year, and he was talking about what makes excellent quality software. And he was saying, of course, it has to be excellently engineered, but that's not enough. Of course, it has to have excellent UX, but that's not enough. It also has to be ethically sound. It has to be for a good purpose. We have to be writing software and delivering software that actually is making people's lives better. And the pressure to improve user experience comes from many different sources. The way that people experience software, and notice how I have to call it user experience because that's the industry name for it, but it's actually the human experience. Sometimes people talk about the lived experience. It's coming from government and it's coming from people out there who are expecting more than they used to. It's coming from the business in terms of market share. But notice that market share might lead you to clickbait and addiction. Notice that government has an agenda. Think about people and what they see as being the ethical norms. And how much should we change those and influence them? And how much should we enable people to maintain the ethical and social foundation of their lives? So think about the whole system. You're not just testing the software, you actually need to think about the human self, their family, their tribe, their world. So product quality also needs to be supporting quality in use and user experience. All of those things are needed. I want you to think about inclusion and diversity as part of how you think about ethical software. And to give you an example of that, I get very anxious when I'm in crowds. So when I'm at airports, I get anxious, not because of the flying, but because of the number of people. That makes going to conferences an interesting and mixed experience for me, I have to say. When I go to an airport, part of what I do to calm myself down is if there's a multi-faith prayer room, I go in there and meditate because it's a quiet space. There's usually very few other people in there also quietly praying or meditating. And if I go to some airports, it says something like multi-faith prayer and meditation room, and I know I can go in there. It's inclusive, regardless of your religion or your belief system or your lack of belief system, you can go in there and quietly meditate. So it's inclusion. At one particular airport I went to, I really needed to be able to do that. I was particularly anxious. And when I eventually found the prayer room, it was divided into 3 firmly labelled, diverse groups. The Islamic prayer room, the Jewish prayer room, and the Christian prayer room. I'm not a Muslim, I'm not a Jew, I'm not a Christian. I just stood there and I can't go into any of those doors. It was diverse, but it wasn't inclusive. So when you're thinking about software, when you're thinking about what you're delivering, you need to think about both, inclusive and diverse. And with all of that, thinking about the ethics of it. Think about the range of people who are not us. Who are you building the software for? You're building it for everybody. You're building it to benefit everyone, and everyone is different to you. So as practitioners, we have a duty to that wide range of people who have a wide range of technical access, a wide range of problems, a wide range of needs, who are different to us. Our duty is to serve those people, all those people, however different they are to us. We need to be thinking about them because we need to stand for them in the projects, all the time, thinking, who are we building this software for? Thank you very much.